Ever wondered what the purpose of life is? Not just the purpose of your life, but the purpose of humanity, maybe even the purpose of everything there is. It might sound far out that such an answer exists, but we'll dig into it anyway. This video provides a general answer to the purpose of life based on the work of Martinus. The general purpose of life has two sides, a timely and an eternal one. I will tell you about the timely and the eternal perspectives. The two perspectives make two different purposes. The two purposes from the two perspectives are distinct and somewhat surprising. In this video, we also go into finding your own purpose in life, so stick around until the end of the video. Please leave a comment and let me know about what you think about the purpose of life. Subscribe to the channel if you want more answers to the big questions in life. Before we go into the purpose of life, we have to understand the difference between the timely and the eternal perspective. I have linked to a video that goes much more into this topic than I can do in this video. The link is in the description of this video. Let's start with the timely perspective. Something timely is something that has a start and an ending. Having a start and an end requires change. Change is also what we know as movement. The timely is what we experience. It is always changing, even though we might not see it. A philosopher once said that you cannot step into the same river twice. So why is that the case? Well, that's because the river is always changing a little bit, so you cannot step into the same river, like in the exact same river twice. The water does not have the exact same condition the second time you enter the river. It has changed a little bit. This principle goes for everything else that is timely and the things that we can experience directly. Our houses, our bodies, all other things, yeah, even our thinking is changing all the time. So we never experience the exact same thing. Understanding that the timely never becomes the exact same thing in its detail is a really deep understanding of the timely. Of course, the timely can be similar to things that we have already experienced, so we can recognize and navigate life. We know what a house is, so we can use it in a practical way, but that does not mean it is the exact same house we enter every day. The house is changing and we are changing a tiny little bit all the time. This is the nature of the timely. The eternal is the contrast to the timely. It has no start and it has no ending. The eternal is something absolute in the sense that it never changes. If the eternal was changing, then it would not be eternal. Something that changes is by definition not the same at any given time and thus not eternal. Something that doesn't change cannot have any changing details. In fact, it cannot have details at all. It is something unmanifested because it has no details. It is something that just is. That is the only analysis it has. Something there is. I go into more details on this in the video about the timely and the eternal, which I have linked in the description below. So if something eternal has no details, can we not say anything about it then? Well, we actually can give it characteristics, but they are not expressed in concrete details. Characteristics can be expressed in eternal principles. These principles never changes. They make up the eternal world picture upon which everything is founded. This is what this channel takes its departure from. A central part of this eternal world picture is that there is something that exists. It only has the analysis of something that exists. It might sound obvious, but it has consequences for our thinking. There are other eternal principles, and I'll come back to one of them later in this video, and many others in later videos. With the understanding of a timely and eternal perspective, we'll go into the purpose of life seen from a timely and eternal perspective. So what is the purpose of life from the eternal perspective? The eternal has no concrete detail, so that will be the same for the eternal purpose of life. So the eternal purpose of life is quite simply to experience life. The purpose of life from an eternal perspective has no further details than to experience life. From an eternal perspective, life doesn't have a specific direction, doesn't have details or concrete purpose. The only purpose is to experience life without any given specifics on what to experience. the purpose is to experience something, whatever it is, just something, and this is something without a detail. When we start to talk about specific purpose of life, we are entering a timely perspective on life. With a specific direction in life, the purpose of life becomes concrete, and we start to talk about what we want in details with our life. We can only have a more concrete meaning in life in the timely and detailed perspective. We don't find a concrete meaning in life with the eternal perspective, because it cannot exist due to the lack of details. The purpose is only that something wants to experience something. This is as far as the analysis can get from the eternal perspective, because there is no details. It is something that wants to experience something. That is an eternal perspective on the purpose of life. So let's get into the world of details and the purpose of life from a timely perspective. What is the purpose of life from a timely perspective? Let me start by giving some background. The outset of this is that the general purpose of life is to renew itself to keep existing. Martinus explains that we need contrast to experience. There is no white without black and vice versa. We cannot write with a white on a white background. We need a different color to write with than the background in order to create a contrast so we can experience the writing. This observation goes for what we see, but also for experience in general. For instance, there is no pleasant without something unpleasant. We need contrast to experience anything. We need contrast to be alive. Martinus named this the contrast principle, and this is an eternal principle. All life exists due to the experience of contrasts. The actual contrasts we experience are timely and have to be created. Our current situation as humans is that we have culminated in darkness, and now it goes towards a lighter or more pleasant life situation. But we are not there yet, and we are still experiencing suffering in our life. However, we will get into a lighter or more pleasant way of living. Martinus explains that we have an eternal life, and I cannot go more into details on this eternal life in this video. I'll come back to it, but that's what he states. What is relevant here is that we're going from a darker period in our eternal life towards a brighter and more pleasant existence. But after we get to this pleasant and lovely existence, we will get saturated and bored by this pleasant and lovely existence at some point in a distant future. It might sound a bit strange that you can get tired, bored by having a pleasant time, but think about getting your favorite food all the time. At some point you will want to have something else than your favorite food, no matter how much you like it right now and how much it takes to get something else to eat. The same applies to having what we currently consider a pleasant life. At some point, this pleasant life becomes too much and becomes a burden. A longing for the contrast grows into the living being. A desire for an existence that is contrast to the peace and happiness starts to grow within the living being. This desire draws the living being back to the fighting and unpleasantness that we know from our current life. What are wars, poverty, starving, slavery, so forth, other things than unpleasantness? Right now we want to get away from these things, but when the living being has had too much of the contrast, that is loving each other, it starts to long after the unpleasant again. This might sound a little bit strange, but this is the whole idea behind the eternal world picture. After a very long period in the light, it wants to get back into the dark or life based on not knowing. This experience will also be saturated for the living being. This is where we are right now, where we have had enough of the dark part of life. After the dark period, we will strive towards coming back to a light existence. This going back and forth between light and dark existence goes on forever. This ensures that the consciousness of the living being, or us, keeps getting renewed through new experiences. The living being will always have a desire for something new, being the dark or the light. We, as human beings, are in the process right now of leaving the dark part of life and are moving towards the light part of life again. This movement is the purpose of our life, seen from a timely perspective. We're in a slice of eternity where we have had enough of suffering. We want the true meaning with life and want a new form of pleasant life. We just have to learn how to do it. Right now we are gaining experience that brings us towards this goal, and at some point we will get there. So the purpose of life is to experience contrasts. In the timely perspective, we are going from a darker period towards a lighter one. That is the general purpose of our life right now. We have looked into the eternal and the timely purpose of life, and both of them has been quite abstract. So Martinus has these abstract descriptions in his work, but he also has more practical guidelines on the purpose of life. And I will go over one of them now. Martinus gives guidelines on whether or not we are dealing with the right realities in our lives for us to go towards a more light and pleasant way of living. So let's take a look at what he writes about it by looking at a quote from his work. The quote is from the Book of Life, which is Martinus' main work. The Book of Life is in 7 volumes, and this quote is from the preface in the first volume. The first volume of the Book of Life was first published in 1932. I should also say that the quote is translated from Danish to English. So Martinus writes, in order to help the seeker of truth, and I should say the seeker of truth is a person who really wants the truth and is willing to give up quite a lot to get it. He sets it over pride or status, and he is also, as a person, quite developed with feelings and intelligence. But more about this in another video. Let's continue with the quote. So in order to help the seeker of truth, and Martinus continues, to recognize if he has found the right source, which is especially valid for him. So I should say this is about whether you have found the right thing or your purpose in life. It will be helpful to mention that such people, things, are manifestations that are of special inspirational value to an individual, or such realities which can operate as identical with the above mentioned stimulating basis. So what Martinus refers to here is pretty much everything that's stimulating for a person. That could be other people, it could be forms of manifestation, how that's so generic as it can be. It can be books, religion, your work, occupation, whatever you have in your life that gives you some kind of inspiration. This is not that unusual, but he comes with some more characteristics here in the next part of the quote. So he continues, can very easily be recognized by the fact that they, by being experienced and sensed, so it's something practical, send through the individual in question a flow of warm waves, a flow of life force and energy, of ideas, of longing to represent a higher degree of perfection, a flow of hope and faith in Providence and the Father, of divine satisfaction, harmony and happiness, and an irresistible urge for loving. In other words, an increased ability to love everything and everybody. So these are the signs you want to look for if you want to know if you're on the right shelf, so to speak. Furthermore, it's also what we usually talk about as passion in our life, but it's our words, and what Martinus writes is much more broad. In the next sentence, he continues with this. Where he is in contact with one or more of these flows, there is his right place in life. And I have interpreted that being in the right place in our life is the same as found our purpose in life. We don't need all these flows that Martinus mentions here. If the ideas comes flowing or something else that he mentions, we are at the right place in life. If we are annoyed, angry, or similar, we don't like our surroundings, we are not in the most optimal place in our lives. We should not give up on things. We can work on it, but we can also strive towards a life situation where one or more of these characteristics are in our life. We have to manage our lives so we can get to a point where we have these flows of warm waves, of ideas, of feel of a higher meaning. It does not matter what it is we do. what religion, literature, work, art, science, or whatever details life consists of for us. We are all different, and our purposes and places in life are also different. We have to learn that we are all different, and it's okay to have different interests in lives and different perspectives. We call this tolerance. We have to be better at tolerating these differences, especially if we want a more peaceful life. I put a link in the description to the Book of Life where you can read the quote in a broader context. So what do you think about purpose of life? Have you found your purpose of life? Leave a comment below and let us know about it. If you liked the video and want to hear more about big philosophical questions, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.